Okay, Masechet Eruvin, Daf Bet, right? Why do we start on Daf Bet? Why don't we start on Daf Aleph? There is no Daf Aleph, right? So why is that? Well, the traditional answer is that you never, right? You never complete something or begin something. You're always in the middle of learning Torah. So right there on Daf Bet. Okay, the real answer is because the first page, Daf Aleph, is the title page. That's where it says Masechet Eruvin. So this is the second page. Okay, anyway, we start on Daf Bet. With a discussion Eruvin and a Mavoy. So Mavoy shu gaboa lemala me'asrim amma yema'ayet. Mishnah, as usual, plunges us right into the middle of the controversies and is already telling us how to fix something that's wrong. We don't even know what the issue is. So, this is obviously meant to be Torah Shebe'al Peh and meant to have explanation and background. Okay, so we'll provide a little bit of background, not too much, just enough to understand as we go along. So in ancient cities, Roman cities were designed with homes that open up to a common courtyard, a chaser. And so if you want to carry from one home into the chaser or within the courtyard, then you have to join them together. Right, you have to join them together, and the word eruv literally means combining, joining together, mixing. So what we do is, as it's called eruv chaserot, this is what we do today in modern cities. Eruv chaserot says that the shared space of the courtyard, or in a modern city, the side roads and sidewalks, we are joining together. So what we do is we put a meal in the chatzir or one of the houses and say this meal symbolizes that we're joining it all together. In order to do that, of course, has to be enclosed. We assume here it's already enclosed, and then the eruv is simply the common meal that we deposit in one place, which we do until today. And the modern eruvin is actually a meal. A lot of people don't even know that we do that. But in our Bet Knesset, once a year, we deposit some masa right before Pesach, and that's the common meal that serves the whole year. We have to make sure that nobody eats it. So we keep it in a closet there. Okay, so that's the chaser, and that joins together all the people that live in the chaser. However, besides the courtyard, multiple courtyards, this one, and maybe there'll be others, would join together and share a mavoy. You can call it an alleyway, a side street, and that side street would open to the Reshut Harabim. So if you imagine this is the main thoroughfare, call it Main Street, would go along here, and there would be lots of these side streets or alleyways, each of which opens to a courtyard, and each courtyard, maybe there's several family members, brothers, cousins, that live within a hosh, right, a courtyard. So just like you make a eruv chaserot to join the different houses within a courtyard, if the members of this courtyard and this courtyard want to carry from one to the other, or from here to the common area, right, or from here to the common area, then they have to make something called shituf mevaot, which means the same thing. It's a partnership of the various courtyards into one mavoy. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. So all this, as long as you have enough walls and you do the common meal, you can carry all within this area. What you may not do is carry into Reshut Harabim. Reshut Harabim, that's mideoraita. Mideoraita, you can't carry 4 amot on that main street, and you cannot carry from Reshut Harabim into Reshut HaYachid. Okay, that's the Torah law. But the rabbis came and added extra stringencies and said even within this area, although this entire area is not a main thoroughfare, right, people can't walk in and out. You see it's like blocked off. It's a cul-de-sac or a dead-end street. We'll discuss if it's not. So the rabbi said it looks very similar, and people might get confused if they say you can carry in an alleyway. Then people will think, I can also carry onto Main Street, the Reshut Harabim, and on Main Street. And so therefore, in order to make a separation, they say, put something here, right? Let there be some kind of sign at the entryway, so that will remind you, and that's a kind of a symbolic wall, and you do that partnership. And that way, that will indicate that carrying in here is allowed, and not carrying outside. All right, so we already assumed that we know all that, and now we're discussing how big this space is. See if the space is too wide, or the opening is too high. In other words, this is the top, the sign that we put on top is too high. It will be too high to see. That's what we're discussing. How high could this be, and how wide is this allowed to be?
So, Rabbi, the
Yes.
Mavoy joins two areas, like two different Eruv areas.
Good. Yes. Mavoy joins two courtyards.
And each courtyard has its own Eruv?
And each courtyard joins multiple houses, multiple homes, right? That's kind of like a fractal, yeah. Okay, and yes, and each one it's very similar laws, but a little different. Okay, as we'll see as we go along. So mavoy, that's what we're talking about. This common alleyway. If that beam that you put on top is more than 20 amot high, about 30 feet high, then you got to make it lower, right? The idea is that your eye usually sees, if you're kind of from far away, you can see that high. If it's higher than that, you're not going to notice it. And then if you don't notice it, you're going to walk right into the main street and you're going to be carrying. So you need an indicator. So more than 20 amot is too high. Rabbi Yehuda says it's okay, you can be even higher. Okay, that's the mahloket we're going to discuss. And now the width. And if the alleyway is too wide, the opening, the entranceway is wider than 10 amot, about 15 feet, right? Amaz from here to here, about 1.5 feet. Then you got to make it smaller. In other words, like this. Here's the next one, right? If this is more than 10 amot, you got to put some, add some wall or fencing so that it'll be smaller. It has to look like a doorway and not like something that's simply completely open. However, here's another way to solve the problem. If you make a surat petach, means a frame of a doorway. Even if it doesn't have doors, as long as it has two side posts and a top post, that's a frame. So if you have surat petach, it can even be even wider than 10 amot. Okay, so this is very important for halacha l'maaseh. What we have, with most of the Eruvin across America, across the world, it's not really convenient or possible to put walls all around a section of a city. But to make a surat petach, right, the top beam doesn't have to be of any particular size. It can even be a fishing line. And so if that fishing line is attached to some kind of pole that goes down to the ground, and you can have as many of these as you want, and they can be as big as you want. And so you just join these together and you have a kind of symbolic wall. It has a lot of doorways, but it's still a wall. All right, so that's very important, and that's what we use. So the surat petach is an easy way to make something that is wide. If you don't do that and you have only a cross beam, then it has to be less than 20 amot. And the space between has to be less than 10 amot. All right, that's the Mishnah. We saw that. Go ahead.
When we're saying that it has to have this doorway, is that like a freestanding doorway, or is it we're saying that these posts on the side posts are touching the walls of the mavoy?
They can be touching the walls, but you can't use the wall itself. It has to be something that juts out.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, let's say it's just like a 10-foot doorway in a 10 amot doorway in a 30 amot wide mavoy.
Yeah, that's okay. If it could be wide, as long as it's a doorway, as long as it has two posts and a cross beam, it can be wider.
And
if
the
it
posts
doesn't
don't
have
need to
those two
connect to the
posts,
wall.
like
that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound right at all. If you have an actual wall there that's 10 amot wide and you have space on either side, it's not going to be enough.
If there's space, it's not a wall.
Right. So he's saying if you have a surat petach That's 10 amot wide in a 30-foot wide or 30 amot wide opening. It's not. That's not
No,
good.
the opening has to cover the whole opening. Is that what David was saying? I didn't understand.
Yeah.
This Surat Petach has to cover the entire opening. It's to go from end to end. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. If it does go from end to end, then it can be as wide as you like. Right. But if you don't have the side posts, then these are the maximums. Okay, so there's really only one dissenting opinion, the Yehuda, who says that the height can be higher, as high as you want. The Yehuda does not dissent regarding the width. The Talmud will say that he also disagrees with the width, and he says the width can be even more than 10 amot. But that's not the initial assumption, right? So just note that parallel here, the Yehuda discusses the first. He doesn't say anything about the second. All right, now what we're going to do in the Talmud is we're going to compare the law here to a law about Sukkah, right? Because Sukkah also is a lot about architecture and what is going to be the maximum height of a Sukkah. And in turn, we're going to compare both of them to the Mishkan and Bet HaMikdash. So because we want to define what a petach is, what is considered an opening, a doorway. In order to define that, we're going to look for what other things are built and what other architecture is there in the Torah, in the Tanakh that we can learn from. And so we're going to be spending some time looking at the different dimensions of the Mishkan and the Bet HaMikdash. A question to keep in mind that we'll return to at the end is, are these simply technical definitions? Like we want to know what does the word petach mean, and we open our concordance and find it there? Or are there deeper symbolic meanings in the comparison between Eruv and Sukkah and Bet HaMikdash? Okay, Tenan Hatam, we see in the beginning of Masechet Sukkah, Sukkah shigeboha lema'la me'asrim amma pesula berbiuda machshir. A Sukkah, you can't have a Sukkah where the schach is higher than 20 ammot. There's various reasons given in the Talmud over there. The Talmud in Sukkah has a parallel discussion and quotes our Masechet Eruvin as well. One of the opinions says that if it's very high, then obviously the walls are going to be too strong, and so it's like a permanent dwelling. You can't have a permanent dwelling; it has to be a temporary dwelling. Another opinion in Masechet Sukkah says that if it's too high, your eyes will not see the schach. Right, and you have to be in the presence of it. You have to notice it. So it has to be lower so that you can notice it. That reason makes sense and is similar to the reason here. Right? Something noticeable within normal range of wherever you would be is 20 amot. Okay, and if not, if it's higher than that, it says pisula. And a biuda machshir, biuda in Sukkah says a Sukkah can be even higher than 20 amot. So you see the biuda is consistent. Okay, now that's the end of the Mishnah. Gemara asks, "Ma'ishana gabe Sukkah detane pesula, gabe mavoy tane takanta." Why the different language? After all, the language is very similar, right? You see, lamala mesrimama, right, and all that. The laws are very similar. Yet regarding eruv, it says yema'et. If it's more than 20, then make it lower. It's telling you a takana. It's telling you how to fix it. Whereas regarding Masechet Sukkah, it just says pisula. It's no good. Why don't you use the same thing here? Why don't you say over here in Sukkah yema'et, or say the same thing over here pisula? Right. So if it's so similar, why the change in language? We have two answers. Sukkah deoraita tane pesula, mavoid rabbanan tane takanta. Sukkah, the law of Sukkah is mideoraita. So all these definitions are kind of like natural law definitions. And so this Sukkah, from the time of the Torah and forever, this is the limit, and otherwise it's no good. Whereas, since the whole law of Eruv is midrabanan, because all this is technically, from the Torah point of view, the Reshut HaYachid, right? It's all private property. It's not a main thoroughfare. So since it's all Rabbanan, it's not like a permanent existing definition. So rather, we just the Mishnah tells you how to fix it, not a permanent definition. Okay, that's the first answer. Technically, you could really still say Pesula, but all right.
That answer is in Sukkah as well, right?
What?
That answer is in Sukkah as well.
Yes. This whole discussion is flipped there. And as discussed there too, yes. Really, you could have written how to fix it regarding a doraita also. Ela, which means sukkah. Ela sukkah de nefishin mile, asek vetane pesula. Avoid the la nefishin mile, tane takanta. Regarding sukkah, where there's many laws and they're very complicated, it just says pasul, because if you want, I have to tell you how many things that could go wrong and how to fix each one, it's going to be too long. I just say pasul. But mavoi, it's very simple. There's the height, there's the width, that's it. And so it's much easier to say, here's how to fix it. So, wherever it's possible, the Mishnah wants to give us as much information as it can. So it'll tell you how to fix it. But in Sukkah, which is very, very complex and what it's made out of and so on, it can't get into all that detail. And so it says Pesula. Okay, I think the second answer makes a lot of sense. And my guess is that the first answer is here, even though it's like rejected. Be'et Ema is interesting here because usually Be'et Ema gives a second possibility. Although this Be'et Ema actually rejects the first one by saying De'oita Ata. Also, you could make it lower. I think that the first answer is introduced here because it's telling us something that Sukkah is De'oraita, and it wants to teach us that Eruvin are D'Rabbanan. A lot of times these opening sukkot are giving us fundamental information about these laws, even though they're doing it through a question and answer dialogue. All right, so we have opening, that was about just the language of this Mishnah compared to that. Now, what is the source? How do we know these definitions of 20 amot high is the maximum? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Chachamim lo limdu lemadu ha'ela mipitcho shel hechal. So the hechal in the Bet HaMikdash, right? Another in Jerusalem, we have the hechal. That's this section here where you have the menorah, the shulchan, the mizbach haketoret, and there's an opening. And this opening is a certain size. We'll see, we learned what the size is in the Mishnah. There's a whole Mishnah called Masechet Midot. Masechet Midot gives you all the size and layout and everything about the Bet HaMikdash. It's one of the oldest Masechtot of Mishnah, probably dating to the time of the Bet HaMikdash itself. Has a lot of first-hand descriptions of the Bet HaMikdash. So we'll read that Mishnah in a second. So this Hechal was 20 amot high, and so and that's called a Petach, and therefore that's the definition of Petach is 20 amot high. That's the max. Rabbi Yehuda says, I don't want to use this opening, but rather this one. This is called an ulam. Ulam is an entrance hall. The Mishkan in the desert Mishkan did not have an entrance hall. It was just this section. But the Bet HaMikdash in Jerusalem did. And this, although in the picture here it looks smaller, was actually bigger. This was a very big entryway. It was even double the size. So, according to Rav's interpretation, Chachamim use this opening, Rav Yehuda goes by this opening. And so that's why he has a bigger amount. Let's see what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah in Masechet Midot says, Pitcho shel hechal, that's this one, the opening for the hechal sanctuary. Gavo esrim amah v'rochbo eser amot. It's 12 by 10. So that's exactly what our Mishnah says, 20 by 10. V'shel ulam gavo arba'im amah v'rochbo esrim amah. And this entrance to the entryway is 40 high by 20 wide. And they both derive it from the same pasuk, ushchato petach ohel moed. That when you offer a sacrifice, when you slaughter a sacrifice, you do it at the entrance, in front of the entrance of ohel moed. So it has the word petach, right there. You go, petach. According to the Rabbanan, the holiness of this area is much higher, and this is a lower level of kedusha. So when it says in the pasuk, it's talking about petach ol moed, it's talking about the higher level. So that's why they're going by this opening. Whereas and so that pasuk is going by the entrance to the sanctuary. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda, they think that Rabbi Yehuda thinks that all of this is the same level of kedusha. Even the entrance hall has the same level as the sanctuary, and so therefore this opening is also important. So petach means is referring to either this one or this one, and since the word petach can mean here something that's 40 amot high, so that's a good definition of petach, can be higher. Okay, so that's the first option of how Rav explains that we derive these laws. Another option of this dispute. According to the Yehuda, I guess they had a difficulty. I mean, this entrance hall is really an addition. It wasn't necessary. It was not in the desert Mishkan. So even the Yehuda thinks that this is not the same level of holiness as the sanctuary inside. He's following a different pasuk that says, talk about petach, ulam habayit, the entranceway of the ulam. This is an ulam, right? This is entrance hall is ulam. And so specifically, there's another pasuk that talks about this opening to the ulam habayit. And so there you go. That's a proof that this specifically is called petach. Okay. There's a difficulty here because it says dichtiv. There is no pasuk that says these words. El petach ulam habayit. Such a pasuk does not exist anywhere in Tanakh. So Tosafot recognizes this already. I mean, there are cases here and there where the Talmud has a slightly different version of a pasuk, usually just maybe a different spelling, a yud or something. So that doesn't seem to be what's going on here. But rather, what it looks like the Gemara is taking two different pasukim and fusing them together or paraphrasing a pasuk. And there is a pasuk in Yechezkel that says petach habayit, not the word ulam, but petach habayit. So what we have here is really more of an interpretation than a quotation of a pasuk. And so since this is petach habayit, and he thinks that it's referring to the ulam, so he's quoting it as petach ulam habayit. Okay, so that's his proof. But Rabbanan, well, how are they going to counter that? Well, it's pretty easy since we don't actually have a pasuk. If you had a pasuk that said that specifically, then fine. So it says, so it just says bayit. So it could be that it's talking about this entryway that opens between the ulam and the inside of the sanctuary, not necessarily the one that faces outside. And so for Rabbanan, there is no proof from that pasuk or that interpretation of a pasuk, of a couple of pasukim together. There's no proof.
Is the first time I'm recalling that we see the word petach is with Avraham?
Petach aholo.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. Right? Yeah, David, it says petach aholo. But
I think also with Noah, there's petach.
Is there?
With the teva.
Yeah, I think that's the first time you'll see the word.
Oh, very nice. So it says petach other places. The problem is we don't necessarily know how big Abraham's tent was.
Right.
So it's that won't help us, right?
Okay.
So this is one place where it says petach, and we have a discussion of how big it was. The Mishkan was smaller, by the way, right? So we're actually not learning it from the dimensions of the Mishkan, but rather the dimensions of the Bet HaMikdash, right? It's a very interesting thing that when Shlomo built the Bet HaMikdash, and he made everything much bigger and different than the definitions in the Torah itself. Okay, but we'll go by those.
On that note, Rabbi,
Yeah.
why are we skipping the Mishkan, and why are we going straight to the Bet Mikdash? And secondary to that is, which Bet Mikdash are they using? Are they using Herod's? Are they using Shlomo's?
Yeah, okay, very, very good questions. Why are we skipping? I think what we have first is the Mishnah, right? Our Mishnah that says 20 high and 10 wide. That's what we have. Rav is coming afterwards as a commentary and saying, hey, I recognize that, those dimensions. I know it from the Mishnah and Midot. Mishnah and Midot is describing Herod's temple, right? And so, this is a good match here. So I think that, I think he's backing into it after the fact. But Rav is not the only opinion, as we'll see.
And lastly, is ulam, that word ulam, is it in all the manuscripts, or does it appear that way?
So. I didn't check, but I think it is, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Ulam habayit, yeah. I didn't check. I don't know. But, פתח ומולם הבית, הבית פתוח לעולם. והי כי כתיב, היי, במשכן כתיב. Hold on, I mean, regarding, this is relates to the question that you just asked. This word petach refers to the Mishkan. When it says you should slaughter in front of the petach, that's the Mishkan. So why are you now telling me the Bet HaMikdash in Jerusalem if the Torah was referring to Mishkan of the desert? Ashkachan Mishkan Dikre Mikdash, Mikdash Dikre Mishkan. Actually, these words can both refer to each other, right? And Mishkan can refer to the Bet HaMikdash. Another way around. Tilatem hachi had amar Rav Yehuda amar Shemuel shelamim sheshechatan kodem petichat daltot hahechal pesulin shenemar ushchato petach ol moed. This pasuk, same one that we quoted, that says you have to do shechita petach ol moed. We learn, Shemuel learns from that, not only the place where you do shechita, but also the time. Izman shepetuchim v'lo bizman she'en ne'odim. You have to do shechita after the doors are opened in the morning. And then, then you can offer it as a sacrifice, but not before the opening of the doors, which would be around, dawn or, so that's the time period. Now that's what Shemuel said. Now Shemuel was saying this law regarding the Bet HaMikdash, and he's quoting a pasuk regarding the Mishkan. So you see that already Shemuel is assuming that a law about the Mishkan can be applied to the Mikdash. So this is just adding to the need to make sure that Mikdash and Mishkan are interchangeable words. Otherwise, this law wouldn't make sense. Truth is, I think we could bring lots of laws, like almost everything in the Bet HaMikdash we're learning from the Mishkan. So obviously, the Mishkan is the Bet HaMikdash is an equivalent, right? It's an application of the Mishkan. Okay, but so we want verbal confirmation. Bishlama mikdash dikre mishkan dichtib, v'natatit mishkani betochechem. In Vayikra at the end, this is the blessings and curses, it says, I am going to put my Mishkan among you. Now, this is the end of Vayikra. The Mishkan was already built. So yet it says, Mishkan, I'm going to, in the future, set my Mishkan among you. Obviously, if it's talking about the future, it's talking about the Bet HaMikdash. Okay. It's not necessarily the Peshat because, nowhere in the Torah does it actually refer to a permanent Bet HaMikdash. And it could be the Torah had in mind that there would be a traveling Mishkan, and it would travel all around in the different Shabbatim. But obviously, from later history, we know Shlomo built it in one place. And so from that perspective, the blessings and the curses in Vayikra that says you're going to be destroyed and you're going to go into exile and you're going to come back, this is talking about the future and it applies to the Bet HaMikdash. So that's where we see the word Mishkan means Bet HaMikdash. How about the other way around? If you say it's from the fact that Kehat, one of the tribe, the sons of Levi, they're in charge of carrying the Mikdash. Now at that time there was no Bet HaMikdash, so they're carrying something called a Mikdash. What is that? What is it that what does that refer to? Ahu ba'aron ketib. No, they're just carrying the Aron. The Aron is called the holy thing, but it doesn't mean the whole Mishkan is called the Mikdash. At the very beginning of the instructions in Parashat Terumah says, make me a Mikdash, Hashem says, and I will dwell amongst them. And this is the part of the instructions of building the Mishkan, the desert tabernacle is called, in its entirety, it's called a Mikdash. Okay, this is a good proof. All right, so there we go. These are interchangeable words and concepts. And so therefore, a law that applies to one and a word, petach, that applies to one, we can then transfer over and say that the second Bet HaMikdash had this dimension, the word petach means that as well. Okay, good. Ben l'Rabanan, ben l'Rabbi Yehuda, l'elfu mi petach shar he'haser. Okay, once we're looking for the word petach, right, as Moselle was correct to do, there is other places that it says petach, and one of them is the outer courtyard of the Mishkan. We have a picture here. In other words, here, this Mishkan is in the middle, but besides, there's a whole outdoor space where the large altar is, the Mizbeach, where we put animals. And then that whole outdoor area is surrounded by a gate. And the gate has an opening right, on the eastern side that you go into. Now, how big, it's called a petach, how big was the opening of this fence? That's what we want to find out. And that would be a bigger one and could be useful. So according to either opinion here, why don't they learn from Shar HaChaser, Tichtib, or HaChaser? Now we're talking about the width. And you see, it assumes that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan both think that the maximum width is 10 amot in the Mishnah. So it says, Orech HaChaser me'a ba'ama, berochav 50 ב-50, bekoma 5 amot. So this courtyard was 100 amot long, 50 amot wide, and 5 amot tall. וכתיב ב-15 אמה כרעים לכתף. And it had curtains that would be put on the poles to make this fence, and the curtains are 15 amot. And it says, הכתף השנית מזה ומזה לשער חסר כלים 15 אמה. מעלה 5 ברוחב 20, אף כאן 5 ברוחב 20. So if we look here, we see that this was 15 amot. It says it's 15 amot on this side and 15 amot on this side. So the whole thing is 50 altogether. And so 15 and 15 is 30. That leaves 20 in the middle. So the opening is 20 amot. There you go. So we have a 20 amot opening, and it's called 5. And so there, now you see that something that's 5 tall by 20 is called an opening. So too here, even if it's only 5 and 20, it's called opening. If it's taller than that, all the more so, it should be even wider. But let's just stick with 20. See, 20 amot wide should be okay. So this is a good question. Why don't you learn from the courtyard? The answer is Petach Shar Chaser Ikre Petach Setama La Ikre. It says Petach Shar Chaser, the opening of the courtyard. So of the courtyard, yeah, but not just the word Petach by itself. It's not called that. Maybe an opening for a courtyard is different from an opening to a building. Well, actually, here in Eruv, it's actually opening to a kind of courtyard or a street. But just in terms of definition of a word, we're looking for the word unmodified so that we can find a better answer. Although the word was modified before also. So it's not such a great answer. We have a second one. It says that these curtains were 15 amot in some dimension, but it doesn't say which way. And so it could be that it's not 15 amot this way, or rather 15 amot this way. And maybe this is a very tall curtain that hangs down. It doesn't say how many curtains there are either. So there could be a lot of tall curtains, and maybe it closes it up even more. It could be maybe 30, 40, 50. It doesn't, I don't know. That doesn't say how much it is. And so therefore, we don't actually have a proof because we don't know exactly which way it went. Hold on. That tall? Hakatif koma 5 amot. How can you say it's 15 amot tall? It says explicitly 5 amot tall. Answer: Ahu misafat mizbeach u'lema'la. It says 15 amot. The farmer says 5 amot tall. That's talking about how much more it extends over the mizbeach. The mizbeach on the inside was 10 amot tall, and so perhaps it means 5 amot means 5 amot more than the mizbeach in it. So that would be 10 plus another 5 for a total of 15. Okay, it doesn't really sound like that when you read the pasuk, but I guess if the idea of a fence is for privacy or something, then it is a possibility. And so in that case, we reject the word petach in the chatzer as a source for the dimension. Okay. ורבי יהודה בפתחו של אולם גמר, והתנן ברכה 10 אמות ימעט, ולא פליג לרבי יהודה. Now going back to Rav's theory, that according to Rav Yehuda is comparing the eruv to the outside opening to the entranceway to the ulam. Now the ulam was 40 amot high. So why did we say that that's the max? In the Mishnah, it just says, and Rabbi Yehuda says, doesn't say anything actually there, right? Oh, sorry, regarding the width. It looks like Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the width. But if he learns about from the ulam, then it could even be even wider, even up to 20. So why would he all say only 10? In fact, the Yehuda disagrees with Rabbanan in both dimensions. And although the Mishnah only talks about the height, there's another baraita where he disagrees regarding the width. The Tanakama Rabbanan say has to be 10 amot wide is the max opening, whereas the Yehuda says, "Eno sarich lema'et." No, you don't have to make it any smaller, even if it's more than 10, it's okay. All right, so therefore the comparison to ulam makes more sense. Why do you mention that in the Mishnah? I mean, this is good, important information. You're right, it didn't, but it mentioned it in the height, and you got to figure out that there's a parallel, and he's going to also disagree regarding the width. But it happens, it's true, even though it doesn't say it. Hold on. If he's really learning, if according to Rav, the Yehuda is comparing it to the ulam, then it should be even bigger. Sorry, there is a limit. Tanya, מבוי שהוא גבוה מ-20 אמה, ימעט. רבי יהודה מכשיר עד 40 ו-50 אמה. ותניא בר כפרה עד 100. And so here, Rabbi Yehuda says, according to this baraita, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't say any amount. It doesn't say 40 amot. If he's comparing it to the ulam was 40 amot high. That should be the max. Here it says 40 or 50. That's more than 40. And Bar Kapara says even 100. So this is not really parallel. So Bishlam al Bar Kapara Guzma. Okay, fine. Bar Kapara, he was just saying an exaggerated number. Even 100. It didn't really mean 100. It could mean 40. He's just saying more, a lot more. All right. Ela Rav Yehuda, my Guzma, but Rav Yehuda's language doesn't look like it's an exaggeration. It looks like it's an exact language. Bishlam al Rav Yehuda Ba'im, Kabar B'tcho She'olam. The 40 is okay. Ela Hamishim Minale, but why does he think it could be 50? Where would he get that from? Amar Rav Chisda, Hamatnita At'ite Lerav. Tetanya, Mavoy Shu Gavoa Ma'asrim Amma, Yoter Mipitcho Shel Hechal, Yema'et. הוא סבר מדרבנן מפתחו של היכל גמרי, ורבי יהודה מפתחו של אולם גמר, ולא היא רבי יהודה מפתחה דמלכין גמר. Oh, okay, so Rav Chisda says the following baraita, Rav learned it, and this is what led the Rav down an incorrect path. Okay, so in other words, we're actually rejecting Rav's interpretation. What is the baraita that caused him to misunderstand this? This following baraita, this is mavoy, that's 20 amot, right, is okay. More than that is more than the hechal, and you have to make it lower. You see this baraita is explicitly comparing the mavoy to the hechal and 20 amot. So Rav read this, which is correct, and said, since the rabbis are learning it from hechal, it must be the Rabbi Yehuda is learning it from the ulam. And that's why he made that interpretation. But in fact, this is not true. And the correction is that Rabbi Yehuda actually learned it from palaces of kings. Palaces of kings are any amount or even much higher. So in other words, the part of what Rav said is based on this baraita and is correct. But the other part, which he extrapolated from it, contradicts this baraita of 40 and 50 and is not said explicitly in this baraita. And therefore, the Gemara rejects that comparison of Rabbi Yehuda that he makes to the ulam, to the pitcho shel ulam. Okay. V'Rabbanan, imi pitcho shel hechal gemiri libao delatot kahechal. Now back to Rabbanan. Now we established the comparison of mavoy to the opening of the sanctuary. If you're going to learn it from the sanctuary, however, then maybe you require actual doors to be there, right? You need doors because that'll close it. just like the Echal. Allah matana nechshe mavoi, Bet Shema omrim lechi v'kora, Bet Hillel omrim lechi o kora. But in Mishnah it says, Mishnah we're going to see more of, says that mavoi can become kosher by two opinions. Bet Shammai says lechi or kora, meaning a vertical post or a beam, one or the other is sufficient. Both. Lechi v'kora Bet Shammai. Bet Hillel says one or the other, a post or a cross beam. That's all you need. It's kind of a symbolic wall or just a sign of a remembrance. That's all you need. You don't need doors. So why wouldn't you need doors according to Rabbanan? Says, you're right, the sanctuary had doors, but the doors were just for privacy. They weren't really even necessary in the sanctuary. If you didn't have the doors in the sanctuary, it would still be okay, it would still be holy. It was not an essential part, and therefore it's not an essential part of Eruv, of the Eruv either. אלא מעתה, לא תענה לסורת הפתח, תאכל סורת הפתח חביה לו, אפילו הכי 10 אמות הוא דרווח. Hold on, if you really want to make the comparison strong, then why'd you say that surat petach? If I have both the crossbeam and two sides, then it can be as big as I want. Why'd you say that? If I'm really comparing it to the Hechal opening, the Hechal opening had a doorway, it had a lintel, it had two doorposts, and yet it's only 10 amot wide. So say that's the maximum, even if you have a surat petach. So why do we say in our Mishnah that if you have a doorway entrance frame, then you can make it as big as you want? Hold on. This whole comparison was only according to Rav in the first place. Hold on. With this Mishnah, one time Rav Yehuda was teaching it and was saying it in front of Rav, and the way he said it was "Eno sarich lemayet," the same version that we have. But Rav corrected him and said, "Don't say eno sarich lemayet, say sarich lemayet." In other words, according to Rav, in his version of the Mishnah, said that even if you have a doorway frame, you still have to make it smaller than 10 amot wide. So in Rav's version, it does fit. So that's why for Rav, the comparison between the Mavoi and the Hechal fits together in all its ways. But according to our version of the Mishnah, which says that a doorway can be even bigger, that comparison would actually not fit. And so we'll have to look for a different opinion. And we'll continue with that tomorrow. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen ve'amen.